Hi Pratik. Hi Boang. Happy we're going to restudy, do a revision on plant, right? Right. So starting from here, among the vascular plants found in the kingdom Plantae, which belongs to the kingdom Eukarya, vascular plants that bear seeds are known as seed plants, right? So if there's seeds in the propagation of the plants, that is called a seed plant, right? In sexual reproduction, the formation of a fertilized ovule as a seed is an evolutionary developed feature, right? That is a developed feature. The speciality of seed plant is that the seeds are surrounded by a seed coat formed by the sexual reproduction. Seed plants are classified into two main groups, main groups based on whether these seeds are open to the external environment or are not open to the external environment, right? So namely, there are like two types, like open seed plants and closed seed plants, right? Open seed plants then the closed seed plants, right? These are the two, right? Open seed plants are woody plants, which means it has a stem, like a strong stem. They are also called, the open seeded plants are also called the non-flowering plants, right? They are also called the non-flowering plants because they don't make flowers. They just only have the seed, that is as an open seed, not covered with anything. So usually the flowering plants cover the seed with a fruity body, right? That is the difference. But in the non-flowering plants, they only have the seed, which is just stays open to the environment as a seed itself. So that is why they call the seeded plants. There's only seeds. But the difference of the closed seed plants are that the seed is covered with or closed with the envelope of a fruity body, like a fruity part, and that fruity part is formed with the support of a flower, right? Because if there's a flower in the sexual reproduction, that the flower becomes the seed and the fruity part together, right? The whole thing is produced with a flower. So if there is no flower, that means it only makes the seeds, and the seeds are just open for the environment, right? So as they do not flower, so the non-flowering plants are the seeding plants, right? I mean the open seed plants, right? Non-flowering plants are the open seed plants because the seed is open. They do not produce fruits, and these seeds are open to the outside environment. In plant evolution, it is said that closed seed plants evolved from open seeded plants. Some group of open seeded plants are shown below. Few are there. There is Cycas there, right? Cycas is there, Pinus is there, and what else? Cypress is there, right? Cypress is there. Ginkgoa or Gingoa are there, right? Ginkgoa or Gingoa are there. Sort of plants are there, right? And plants belonging to the groups are morphologically very different from each other, but all plants bear open seeds, right? And they could be different from each other, but they all bear the seeds. In the early Mesozoic era, open seed plants became the dominant plant, right? In Mesozoic, like many years back, they were the dominant plant, which means they are the most evolved plant on the planet, right? They became dominant like many years back. They are still found as particularly dominant plants in the polar regions, right, in the polar regions, like in the north and south poles, right, polar region. They are still dominant in polar region. Now, if you go to the polar regions, you will see the coniferous plants everywhere, right. This is due to the ability of these plants to withstand cold environmental conditions. When considering the economic value of open seed plants, conifers have a special place. The stem of these plants have a higher economic value as wood. Similarly, open seed plants are economically important. Resins are used as raw materials for various industries and are obtained from these plants as secretions or extracts. Furthermore, plants of a ginkgo group have medicinal value and are used as nutrients, right. An open seed plant, right, which is a flowering plant, right, which makes the fruit. The most evolved plant better adapted to the terrestrial environment are the angiosperms, right. We call it the angiosperms as well, right. Their sexual structures are more protected and complex, and they develop into flowers, right. So, the angiosperms they develop it into flowers. That is, these plants produce flowers. This is why these plants are also called angiosperms. Can be divided into two groups accordingly to the number of cotyledons in the seed. What are those? The monocots, monocot plants, and the dicots, right. Monocot and dicot, right. Right. In angiosperms, there are two types called monocotyledonous, these, and the dicotyledonous, right. The structural features of these leaves, stem, roots and flowers of monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plants are different from each other, right. So, these monocots, which mean it has only one there is only one cotyledonous or one leaf in the seed when it becomes the plant, and in the dicotyledonous it has two cotyledons, and they evolve back into the complete plant, right. So, in angiosperms there are two types called monocotyledonous plants and the dicotyledonous plants that as we discussed. The structural feature of the leaves, stems, root and flowers of monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous are different from each other, like there are differences. So, I had to compare it, and most of the time maybe one or two of them MCQs, and probably can come at maybe half of the structured essay, rarely the complete essay, but like not the essay, like the rarely the complete structured essay, but there will be at least a half a structured essay from this part, like in the second part. So, leaf structure of monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plants, right. Various differences in this structure of leaves of monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plants can be observed. So, these are the differences. Right. So, now the first feature, there are cases that are bilateral and non-bilateral, like the monocotyledonous leaves. If you remember the leaf of a coconut tree, they are bilateral in shape, which means it can divide into two even parts or two equal parts in one of the axes of the plant leaf, right. So, they call it the bilateral leaf structure, right. They are bilateral leaf structure. They have a bilateral leaf structure. They have a bilateral leaf structure, right. And in the dicotyledonous, if you remember one of the mango leaves, they like seems bilateral, but coming to the very edge, the shape changes and makes it not bilateral at all, right? But at the very beginning, the leaf seems bilateral, but most probably the end of the plant, like end of the leaf, it becomes like different in shape, so it's not bilateral at all. But some of the plant leaves are bilateral, so the dicotyledonous plants show the bilateral and the non-bilateral structure in their leaves, right? So the second point, the leaf blade is thin and elongated. Now remember one of the coconut leaves, one of the leaves, it's a bunch of leaves in one branch. So now if you take one of the leaves, it's elongated and like very thin, right? But when it comes to the dicotyledonous leaves, the leaf blade is sort of broad. Like if you remember one of the jackfruit plant leaves and one of the mango plant leaves, so you will understand because the blade is very broad compared to the coconut plant leaf, right? And there is a parallel venation. Now the parallel venation is something like this. So if you take a coconut leaf which is elongated and thin, the veins are like parallel to each other like this, right? Veins are parallel to each other, going parallel to each other. We call this the parallel venation, right? And if you compared one of the mango leaves or the jackfruit leaves, sort of, right? So this is how the bilateral symmetry differs. Now here from the middle, from here to very edge of the leaf, it seems bilateral, but at the end it changes, right? It goes something like this, and that is the bilateral symmetry. But now the venation is something like this. It's networked, right? And this venation is called reticulate, right? That venation is called reticulate. There is a reticulate venous pattern, right? Right. And the third point, the number of stomata located in the upper and the lower epidermis is equal. That is in the monocotyledonous plants. So if you take the monocotyledonous plant, the number of stomata, which are the openings to atmospheric air and the intercellular air, or the intercellular, like this, the air in the intercellular space to transfer, there are stomata. So now in this case, the stomata in the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis are equal, right? They are equal in amounts. But when it comes to the dicotyledonous plant, they are not equal in amounts, in numbers. The majority of the stomata, they are in the lower epidermis, and there is a few number of stomata in the upper epidermis. Yes. So the majority are in the bottom of the leaf or the under epidermis, right? Right. The number of stomata located in the upper and the lower epidermis is equal, but when it comes to dicot, the number of stomata in the subcutaneous epidermis is relatively high, which means the lower epidermis, right? And the leaf epidermis has row of stomata parallel to the longitudinal axis of the leaf blade. So it's something as I draw it. They are parallel to the middle vein, right? The stomata are there parallel to the middle vein, but in a dicotyledonous plant leaf, it's more dispersed. It's everywhere. There's no like certain of a order, but dispersed වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේක parallel. මේක dispersed. ඔව්. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ middle vein එකට parallel යන්නේ. එයාට parallel මෙහෙම තමයි. right? But in the dicotyledonous plant, it's more dispersed. It's everywhere. Doesn't have a certain order, you know, right? And the number of stomata, no, the pores, yeah, the pores are irregularly located in the epidermis, right? So they are irregularly located, like there's no such order. It's dispersed most of the time. So guard cells of the monocotyledonous plants are the dumbbell shaped ones, right? They have dumbbell shapes. They have dumbbell shape. And when we come to the dicotyledonous plants, it's mostly the bean shape, right? It's mostly the bean shape. So these are the two shapes, like this is dumbbell shape. You know, this is how the two of the guard cells are there. Now these are the two of the guard cell, and this is the pore, the hole that the air transfers, right? And when it comes to the dicotyledon plants, it's more like this, like the bean cells, and this is the pore that where the air transfers, right? Right. So the basal media cells are not differentiated into the palisade and spongy layers, like in here. You know, this is one of the dicotyledonous plant structure, a cross section, like this is one of the cross section of dicotyledonous plant leaf, right? This is one of the cross section of dicotyledonous plant leaf. So if you see it here, there's a sort of a arrangement like this, like the palisade and spongy layers, sort of different layers are there in a dicotyledonous plant. But in a monocotyledonous plant, it's mostly the sponge forming or the parenchymal cells dispersed everywhere, but they have layering, sort of a layering, or a much more of a evolved plant leaf is there in dicotyledonous plant, because there's sort of an arrangement there, right? Oh, they're all parenchyma cells. Like none of the collenchyma or sclerenchyma are there. So now sclerenchyma and collenchyma, they are in the xylem and phloem, but the majority of the leaf, except for the like the veins, are even collenchyma and sclerenchyma, but you know the majority of the leaf is parenchyma, right? So if we label this, this is how it sort of is. Now this is the plant leaf. If you see, like when you slice it in its cross section, this is how you see it, and this is one of the, you know, the zoomed diagram, or much more of a you know, like magnified structure of the leaf, and this is how it sees to the naked eye. Now this is magnified, right? So these are the layers. The most top of the layer here, the wax layer, is there. Now if you see it, like very small thin layer of very small thin shiny layer is there. That is the cuticle, right? That is the cuticle that is made of wax most of the time, right? That's one of the lipids, right? It's a cuticle. And the, like below the cuticle, there's this single cell layer. You called it the epidermis, right? Or the upper epidermis, to be certain. Upper epidermis, right? This is upper epidermis. And below the upper epidermis, there is palisade parenchyma cells that are like a fence, right? It's like a fence, like with all the sticks together. It's like a fence that is called the palisade parenchyma, right? It's called the palisade parenchyma. It's called the palisade parenchyma, right? Next. මෙන්න මේ layer එක complete layer එක palisade මේකද මේකද මේවද
ඒ අර මේ palisade parenchyma එකට උඩින් මේ පැත්තට මෙහෙම තියෙන්නේ
මේවද
ඔව්
ඉතින් ඒ තියෙන්නේ මේ upper epidermis එක. single cell layer එක. මේ තියෙන single cell layer එකක් මේ. ඒක තමයි upper epidermis. එයා single cell layer.
අතට උඩ තියෙන එක තමයි wax cuticle එක.
ඔව් මේ නිල් පාටට වගේ තියෙන. that is one of the wax layer cuticle. අර shine එක තියෙන.
ඒකත් එතකොට leaf එකේ ඇතුළටද වැටෙන්නේ?
ඔව්. ඉතින් මේ ඔක්කොම leaf එක තමයි.
cuticle එක කියන්නේ.
cuticle එක තමයි most outer layer. ඒක තමයි අර shine එක තියෙන්නේ. අපි leaf එක මෙහෙම හැරවම shine එක තියෙන්නේ cuticle එක. ඒක wax layer එකක්. ඊට යටින් තියෙන්නේ epidermis එක. ඒකත් single cell layer එකක් විදිහට තියෙන්නේ මේ ඇතුළට light එක වැටෙන්න ඕනේ නේද? නැත්තම් මේ transparent වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒතර මෙයා single cell layer එකක් විදිහට තමයි. එයාත් photosynthesis කරනවා. හැබැයි එයාට store කරන්න බෑ. මේගොල්ලෝ තමයි මෙයා තමයි palisade එක තමයි ඇත්තටම produce කරන්නේ. මෙන්න මේ spongy layer එක තමයි store කරන්නේ. plant leaf එක. ඒ structure හැදලා තියෙන එක කියන organized structure එකක් තියෙනවා හොඳ. අර ඒක evolved feature එකක්. මේ monocot එකට වඩා dicot එකේ. Right, so it's a palisade parenchyma, and the next, the round cell layer, you know, the cell layer with the spherical cells in the very middle with the intercellular spaces is called the spongy. Right, it's called the spongy parenchyma. Right, this is called the spongy parenchyma. And there are like intercellular spaces as well. These are called the intercellular spaces. Now these are called the intercellular spaces. The stomata are there in the bottom. May තියෙන stomata එකේ holes. Make a cross section. So if you take the leaf blade, like if you see this from the bottom, you will see the stomata, the whole shape. හැබැයි මේ තියෙන්නේ මෙහෙම ෆ්ලැට් එකට බැලුවොත්. මේ තියෙන්නේ මෙහෙම ක්‍රොස් එකක්. එතකොට මෙන්න මෙතනින් මෙහෙම භාගයක් කැපෙනවා. එතකොට මෙහෙම බෝල දෙකක් තමයි. So this is the whole. මේක intercellular space. මෙතන තියෙන්නේ stomata. මේක stomata. This is stomata. Right? And there's lower epidermis. Now this is also one of the single cell layers, that is called the lower epidermis. That is lower epidermis. You know, this lower epidermis. And this is a bundle of sheath. This is bundle of sheath covering the xylem and phloem. Right, bundle of sheath. It's a vascular bundle. Bundle of sheath. Right. You call the bundle of sheath the part which is covering the what? Xylem and phloem, right? It's called a bundle of sheath. Now the difference is what? The monocot doesn't have like the what do you call the vascular bundles of the monocots doesn't have this bundle of sheath. It's there xylem and phloem, but there's no cover. There's no bundle of sheath in monocots, right? So the dicots have this bundle of sheath, and the inside of it is the xylem and the phloem, right? So if I take the top part as the xylem, the bottom part becomes the phloem, right? The bottom part becomes the phloem. And what is the very middle part? That is the cambium, isn't it? That is the cambium, right? Which produces the xylem and the phloems. And it is one of the meristematic tissues. Meristematic means it produces new cells, right? Right. So that's all you supposed to know and label. These sort of a question can come to the structure disease, right? So it's good to study and good to remember all the structures, right? The plant leaf. Since the main function of plant leaf is photosynthesis, the structure of the leaf is designed to increase its efficiency. The individual parts of the tissue structure of plant leaf and their functions are given below, right? The cuticle. Yeah. So the cuticle is the outermost layer of the plant leaf, right? It is the outermost layer, right? Cuticle is the outermost layer of the plant leaves. The cuticle is not made of cells and acts as a barrier to prevent large amount of water from evaporating from the surface of the plant, because it's one of the lipid layers. The lipids are hydrophobic, so they distract the water. So it works as a barrier for to reduce the evaporation of the water, right? During high ambient temperatures, the epidermis is able to penetrate the sun rays, right? The epidermis can penetrate the sun rays because epidermis is only one single layer of cells. The living layer of cells that covers the surface of the leaf, it forms a barrier between the leaf and the external environment and protects the internal tissues. The outer layer of these cells that are exposed to the external environment is covered with a layer of wax, that is the cuticle, right? The cells of the upper epidermis do not have chloroplast. It doesn't have chloroplast, right? So doesn't photosynthesize actually, right? I said it wrong the last time. It doesn't photosynthesize, right? Because it doesn't have any of the chloroplast. The upper epidermis transmit light to the leaf, and the hairs which are external growth of the epidermis prevent water loss from the leaf. Now in some cases there are hairs which is coming out of the which are coming out of the the epidermis. There are sometimes the hairs like this, these hairs are there to prevent transpiration, which is the evaporation of water from the plant leaf, right? It is there to that, right? So the and the hairs which are external outgrowth of the epidermis prevent water loss from the leaf. In addition, the shiny hairs also reflect excess light, right? Then the palisade mesophyll, which is the fence shape, right? And about 80% of the photosynthesis in a leaf occurs in the palisade mesophyll. Palisade mesophyll cells contain a large amount of chlorophyll. The column-shaped cells are tightly packed together. They are tightly packed together that they don't have any of the intercellular spaces, and mainly what they are doing is photosynthesis, right? Because they are doing the 80% of the photosynthesis, right? The cytoplasm is a thin layer allowing water and air to pass easily into the cells, right? Then the spongy mesophyll, the cells of the spongy epidermis are loosely packed, right? They are loosely packed, not tightly packed, and the air spaces between them are permeable to air through process called stomata, right? So in the stomata action, they take the atmospheric air inside, right? Stomata are microscopic structures in the lower epidermis that are responsible for gas exchange. The spongy epidermis also contain chlorophyll, which allows photosynthesis to occur. These cells store starch, right? So now this is the main function of the spongy mesophyll, right? They store starch or they store food, and the palisade parenchyma does the photosynthesis, the production of the food, and the spongy mesophyll does the storing of the food, because that is mostly the fruity part of a leaf. The leaf itself has a fruity part, so the fruity part is the spongy parenchyma cells. And the lower epidermis, the layer of cells on the underside of the leaf, the microscopic pores between the control cells or the guard cells, you call it the guard cells actually, right? Rather than the control cells, you call it the guard cells. Between the guard cells, here allows gas exchange. Atmospheric air, carbon dioxide, is brought into the leaf through these pores for photosynthesis. During the day, these pores open, allowing water to move out of the plant, right, which exit through the stomata. This process is called the transpiration, right? This process is called the transpiration. This process is called the transpiration, right? The vascular tissue. Water is transported from the roots to the leaves in the vascular tissue in the stem. The water and salts needed by the leaves are provided to the leaves through the vascular system. The glucose produced by photosynthesis is in the leaf is temporarily stored as what? Temporarily stored as starch, right? As starch in the leaf and is converted into and removed from the leaf. Now, what is the transporting structure of glucose is produced, transported as sucrose, isn't it? Transported as sucrose, yes. Glucose is produced, transported as sucrose, stored as starch. Those are three things. So, this is actually sucrose, right? In the leaf and is converted into sucrose and removed from the leaf, because when it's transporting it should be sucrose, and removed from the leaf through the phloem. Furthermore, the new vascular tissue are formed by the cambium, right? Because the cambium produces the new xylem and phloems. That is one of the meristematic tissues. Only. Leaf shape and leaf configuration. The leaf blades of plants are broad and flat, right? Which increase the area exposed to the sunlight. The leaf area attached to the stem in various leaf configurations, so that both the leaves at the top of the plant and the leaves at the bottom receives good light. Leaf structure. The presence of smooth surface and transparent epidermis and the thin flat shape of the leaves allow light to reach the tissues where photosynthesis occurs. The thinness of the leaves facilitates the diffusion of the carbon dioxide containing green leaf. The green leaf contains photosynthetic pigments such as green pigments, which have the ability to absorb sunlight. And how parenchymal cells are arranged, right? The parenchymal cells in the leaf are arranged in columns. The rearrangement of the cell in rows in this way increases the number of cells in the leaf, which is which turns increase in the number of chlorophylls in that layer. That is the palisade parenchyma cell layer, right? Stomata location. There are specially designed stomata in the leaf to obtain carbon dioxide, which is needed for photosynthesis and to remove the gaseous products produced during photosynthesis from the plant. So, the gaseous exhalation you call it. The guard cells are a specialized type of cells in the leaf epidermis and are dumbbell shaped in monocots and bean shaped in dicots. These guard cells also contain chlorophyll. Guard cells control the shape and size of the stomata opening, right? Gas exchange occurs through the stomata pores by diffusion. When water enters the guard cells, they swell and the cell enlarges. However, when the water enters, the control cells do not stretch uniformly in all directions and enlarge. The relatively thick, less elastic inner wall of the control cell pulls them away from each other. For this reason, the stomata pores open when water is lacking in the guard cell. The pore size of the control cells decreases and the stomatal pores close, right? That is one of the processes. So, this is the stomatas. This is the hole which takes the atmospheric air, you know, like, and the vapors, the water vapors as well. And so, that is the basic structure, right? Transpiration. The release of water vapor from plant leaf is called the transpiration. This occurs in three ways. So, stomatal transpiration, where the transpiration occurs through the stomata, and the epidermal transpiration, where the transpiration occurs through the epidermis. Now, the transpiration is evaporation of water from the leaf, right? And the lenticle transpiration, where the transpiration occurs through the lenticles. Lenticles are the holes in the stem, right? Right. About 85 to 90% of water lost from plants through transpiration is removed through the stomata of the leaves, right? So, the 80% to 90% happens through the leaf stomata, and arid plants show various modifications to reduce transpiration. Examples of this include a reduction in the number of leaves. Now, the arid plants are the plants there in the more sunny areas like Kurunegala, Polonnaru sort of areas, right? So, they have to stop transpiration because they lose much of water and they don't have much of water. So, the number of leaves of the plant, reduction in size of the leaf blade, the presence of sunken stomata, which means the stomata sink. So, they don't open when the sun is raised. The presence of fleshy stems and the presence of waxy layer on hairs or hairs on the leaves, right? මේ ටික තියෙනවා. ඔන්න මේ features ටික පොඩ්ඩක් මතක තියාගත්තොත් කමන්න කියන්නේ transpiration එක නතර ගන්න. අහලා නැහැ. Very less chance of ගොඩක් අඩුයි chance එක but දැනගෙන ඉන්න. හරිද? ඒවන හිතලා ලියන්න පුළුවන් some sort of, right? Importance of leaves: maintaining atmospheric carbon dioxide balance, carbon dioxide and oxygen balance, use as human food, use as animal food, as a fertilizer, to obtain fibers, even for the clothes, as a medicine, for cosmetic production, yes, essential oil extractions, right? For all these, these plant leaves are used, right? And next is the plant stem. Yeah. So, structural differences are seen in the leaves of monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plants, as well as the stem. Comparison of the cross-sectional structure, right? Cross-sectional structure of a monocotyledonous plant stem and the cross-sectional structure of a dicotyledonous plant stem, right? So, the structure of the trunk, vascular bundle, right? So, now the vascular bundle in monocotyledonous plant is scattered. Scattered means it is dispersed everywhere, doesn't have a sort of a order. Dispersed වෙච්ච එකක් තමයි තින් we call it the scattered, right? And in dicotyledonous plants it's radial. Radial means like it is there through its radiuses, right? Ring එක තියෙන. Exactly, it's there in a ring. So, in a ring means like there in a radius, they are in a sort of a radius. Radius එක තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට මෙතන මෙහෙම තියෙන්නේ. Radius එක දිගේ තමයි තියෙන්නේ. They are in the radius of the stem, right? The second one, the number and location of vascular bundles. The vascular bundles are scattered throughout the body in irregular manner, right? It's irregularly scattered, and they are located in a ring shape. See, so it's there in a ring. These are the vascular bundles, the round shaped ones. So they are in a ring, and the availability of the bundle of sheath, right? In monocotyledonous plant, there is no bundle of sheath, which means the xylem and phloem or the vascular bundle isn't covered; they are open. In dicotyledonous plants, it is covered with a phloem and the bundle of sheath is available, right? The bundle of sheath is available. The next point, the structure of the phloem, right? The structure of the phloem. The phloem fibers and parenchyma are absent, right? Phloem fibers phloem fibers and phloem parenchyma, right? Phloem parenchyma are absent. But in the dicots, the phloem fibers and the parenchyma are present, right? Xylem එක. Oh. Phloem fibers and phloem parenchyma are present, right? Are present. Scatter වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඔව්. එක බන්ඩල් එකක් කියන්නේ සයිලම් ෆ්ලෝයම් දෙකක්. bundle of sheet කියලා කියන්නේ cover කරගෙන ඉන්න outer layer එක. Right. And the cortex and medulla, like there are two parts in the stem, cortex and the medulla. The cortex is the outer part, the medulla is the middle part. The ground tissue contains parenchyma cells, right? The ground tissue means the filling of the stem. There's a filling. Like if now if this is the stem, the middle part is filled with sort of a cell type. It has to be filled with sort of a cell, like sort of type of a cells, and that is called the ground tissue, the filling tissue. Ground tissue is the filling tissue, the tissue type which fills the stem, right? The ground tissue contains parenchyma cells in the monocots. අර බෝන් එකේ තියෙන්නේ ප්ලාස්මාද? සෙල් ප්ලාස්මා
නෑ ස්ටෙම් එකේ නෙමෙයි අපි මේ නිකන් මේක ගත්තාම නෑ මේ සයිටෝප්ලාසම් එකේ මැද්ද පිරලා ඉන්නවා කියන්නේ.
ඔව් එහෙම තමයි. ඒ කියන්නේ මේකේ එයාගේ ස්ටෙම් එක මැද්ද සෙල්ස් වර්ගයකින් පිරලා තියෙන. ඒ කියන්නේ majority of the cells are there. So those are called the ground tissue. Ground tissue එකේ තමයි vascular bundles තැන් වල එහෙම තියෙන්නේ. ඒ වගේ එක. Right? The ground tissue contains parenchyma cells and cholenchyma cells as well, right? එතකොට මේකේ parenchyma වලට අමතරව තියෙනව මොනවාද? cholenchyma cells. Right? So එයාගේ පොඩ්ඩක් අර flexibility එක වැඩි. Right. The primary structure of a monocotyledonous plant stem and a dicotyledonous plant stem is shown below. You have to show it, right? So you have to draw it. There's epidermis, hypodermis, and the ground tissue. Then the vascular bundles, right? So you have to draw it. So this is right. Two of the layers are there. The most outer layer you call it the epidermis, right? This layer you call the epidermis. And this you call the hypodermis or the hypoepidermis. නෑ ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට දැන් මේක මේ කතා කරන්නේ primary plant එකක් ගැන. secondary growth එක වෙච්ච එකක් නෙමෙයි. එතකොට epidermis එක සමහර කාලේ single cell එකක්. අර seedling එකෙන් එළියට ඇවිල්ලා පොඩ්ඩක් grow වුණාම පස්සේ තියෙන. ඊට පස්සේ ඒක ඇතුළේ තියෙන hypodermis එක. right, hypodermis. Then there's ground tissue. මේ තියෙන ඇතුළේ තියෙන ground tissue එක. ground tissue එකේ තමයි අර තියෙන vascular bundles ටික scatter වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. right, මේ විදිහට vascular bundles scattered වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේකේ cortex එකක් නැහැ. ඔව්. cortex එකේ ඉන්නේ secondary growth එක වුණාන් පස්සේ. Because many of them are there, right? And this is the ground tissue which fills the inner part, called the ground tissue. Ground tissue, right? Call it the ground tissue. And these are the vascular bundles, right? These are the vascular bundles, or the phloemus and the xylem and the phloemus, the vascular bundles. And the vascular bundles are scattered there. When it comes to the dicotyledonous plant, the vascular bundles are much more of like radial, and there's two layers, right? The cortex and the medulla, and the cortex is made of two, which is the one of the parenchyma cell layers and the collenchymal cell layers, right? And there's a dermis as well, right? Something like this. Three of the layers are there. So the most outer layer, you call it the epidermis, right? Call it the epidermis. And the second layer, call it the hypodermis. Hypodermis. Right? Then there's the ground tissue, right? Did something happen? Did I only draw 2? Supposed to draw 3. Right? One of the extra layers there, නේද? ඒක erase වුණා. layers 3ක් එන්ද? Right? So hypodermis and the epidermis. And there's the cortex inside, right? The inner part is cortex, hypodermis is there, the epidermis is there, and the inner part is the cortex. And the middle part is pith. So now this is the cortex, and the cortex is made of two of the things, that is parenchyma and collenchyma, right? This is made of two of the things. One is collenchyma, the other one is parenchyma. Right? Parenchyma and collenchyma. Doesn't have H. Collenchyma and parenchyma. And the inner part is the ground tissue, and the very middle is the pith. And there are vascular bundles radially, which means like they are in the radius. Like this. Right. they are in the radius. This middle part is called the pith, and this is supposed to be the ground tissue. Ground tissue, right? This is supposed to be the ground tissue. The middle part is the pith, and this is a vascular bundle, and the vascular bundle is covered with the bundle of sheath, right? It's covered with the bundle of sheath. Right, so it's a vascular bundle. Covered with the bundle of sheath, right? So that's a cross section of a monocot and dicot, and this is one of the primary stems, right? Not a secondary growth stem, right? The following similarities can also seen in the stem of the monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plants. The epidermis of the stem is unicellular. There is one cell layer. Having a thick cuticle on the trunk are common. There is a green zone near the cortex or epidermis of the stem, right? There is a green zone in the cortex or the epidermis of the stem, and which is where photosynthesis takes place. The main cell types contain the ground tissue is parenchyma, right? The xylem and the phloem are arranged as vascular bundle, so it's all same. Right? The parts of a dicotyledonous plant stem and their functions, right? So the epidermis, a single layer of cells on the outside cuticle is secreted by them. Living cells, no intercellular spaces, right? The plant is protected from dying out by the high temperature. The absence of intercellular spaces prevents the entry of pathogens, protects internal tissues. The stomata in the stem are important for gas exchange, right? Then the cortex, the several layers of collenchyma cells are often seen from the outside. The inner part of the cortex is made up of parenchyma tissue. There are intercellular spaces between the parenchyma cells. Sometimes these cells may also contain chlorophyll, right? ඇතුලේ parenchyma වල. එහෙම තියෙන. ලේයර්ස් දෙකක් තියෙනවා කියලා තියෙනවනේ cortex එකේ. පියන්ද නේද? මේ යන්නේ. ඔය තියෙන cortex එක parenchyma and collenchyma දෙකකින් යන්නේ. Hypodermis, epidermis and cortex කියලා එහෙම තුනකට යන්නේ, right? And the collenchyma provides stability to the trunk. The parenchyma cells perform storage function. If there is a green layer, it contributes to photosynthesis. Food is stored in the parenchyma cells in the cortex of underground stems, right? Underground stem එක ගන්න food එක දිගටම store කරනවා. නැත්නම් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් primary plant stem එකේ food store කරන්න තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉන්නේ. Vascular bundle. The xylem and the phloem are present together. Later the fascicular cambium forms, right? So later තමයි fascicular cambium කියන එක හදන්නේ. මුලින් තියෙන්නේ xylem and phloem එක විතරයි. හරි. Between the xylem and phloem. The xylem transport water and minerals. The phloem transport organic food. The fascicular cambium lately converts into vascular cambium. The function of the cell division is there. Fascicular cambium එකක් හැදෙන්නේ ඒ කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේක ඇතුලේ තියෙනවා fascicular cambium කියන එක. මැද්දේ. ඒකෙන් තමයි primary growth එක කරන්නේ. Primary xylems and primary phloems හදන්නේ fascicular cambium එක. ඊට පස්සේ interfascicular cambium එක හැදෙනවා පස්සේ මේ තියෙන interfascicular cambium එක. ඒක හැදෙන්නේ පස්සේ. Interfascicular cambium එකයි fascicular cambium එකයි එකතු වෙලා තමයි vascular cambium කියන එක හැදෙන්නේ. Complete cambium එක හැදෙන්නේ. ඒ තමයි මේ complete ring එක තමයි vascular cambium කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒක හැදෙන්නේ පස්සේ. මුලින්ම තියෙන fascicular cambium මැද්දෙන් interfascicular cambium එක යනවා. ඊට පස්සේ complete vascular cambium එක හැදෙනවා. So interfascicular cambium plus fascicular cambium equals vascular cambium. pith, the made up of parenchyma cells. They are spherical cells. There are intercellular spaces. The parenchyma cells between the vascular bundle are called interfascicular parenchyma. ඒ කියන්නේ මැද හැදෙන ඒවා. හරි. Parenchyma cells between the vascular bundle are called the interfascicular parenchyma. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙන්න මෙයා. මෙන්න මෙතන. මැද හොඳයි. Right. Secondary growth of the stem of dicotyledonous plants. Now this is important, right? Right. So the increase in the length of plant stems and the root due to the action of apical divisions is called the primary growth. In the secondary growth, the activity of the vascular cambium and the cork cambium, right? Activity of vascular cambium. I'm sorry, the vascular cambium. Vascular cambium and the cork cambium causes the plant stem to grow its circumference. In most monocotyledonous plants, stem and some dicotyledonous plant stems, secondary growth is not seen. The meristematic tissue in between primary xylem and phloem is called what? Fascicular cambium, right? මුලින් තියෙන්නේ අර fascicular cambium. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ vascular bundle එකේ මැද තියෙන එකද? Fascicular cambium එක. නෙමෙයි. හරි. Xylem phloem මැද තියෙන එක. This cambium divides primary xylem and phloems. එතකොට මේ පැත්තට xylems කැපෙනවා, මේ පැත්තට phloems කැපෙනවා. Cell division එකක් කියන්නේ. එතකොට cells divide කරනවා ඇතුළට xylem, එළියට phloem. That's how it happens. Formation of vascular cambium. In between the vascular bundles, a layer of parenchyma cells gain the ability to cell division and forms interfascicular cambium. Interfascicular cambium, right? Forms interfascicular cambium. This new cambium and fascicular cambium joins together to form the what? Vascular cambium, right? Vascular cambium. Vascular cambium. The cells in the vascular cambium that divide toward the center from the secondary toward the center form the secondary xylem. ඒ කියන්නේ center එක පැත්තට හැදෙන්නේ මොන cells ද? Secondary xylem. The cells that divide outward from the secondary phloem, outward are the secondary phloem. Oh, primary එකට අමතරව. ඒ කියන්නේ මුලින් තිබ්බේ මේගොල්ලෝ විතරනේ. ඔය ඒගොල්ලෝ විතරනේ. ඒක එතකොට මේගොල්ලෝ ඇතුළට primary xylem එළියට primary phloem හැදුවා. හරිද? ඊට පස්සේ මේකේ cambium එක හැදෙනවනේ. Fascicular cambium එක. Vascular cambium එක හැදුනාන් පස්සේ එතනින් එහාට හදන්නේ දැන් එළියට secondary phloem ඇතුළට secondary xylem තමයි දැන් හැදෙන්නේ. එතකොට තමයි stem එකේ growing. හරි. එතකොට the cells in the vascular cambium that divide toward the center form the secondary xylem. The cells that divide outward forms the secondary phloem. The number of cells that divide for the secondary xylem is greater than the number of cells that divide for the secondary phloem. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ඇතුළට divide වෙන cells ගාන වැඩි. එතකොට මේ මැද්ද ගොඩක් accumulate වෙනවා cells වලින්. ඒ හින්දා තමයි stem එක high වෙන්නේ. කියන්නේ xylems හැදෙන number එක වැඩි, phloems හැදෙන number එක අඩුයි. As the secondary xylem increase in size, the vascular cambium must be pushed out of the stem. දැන් මෙයා මේක cells හැදෙනකොට මෙයා pressure වෙනවනේ. එතකොට vascular cambium එක මොකද වෙන්නේ? එළියට තල්ලු වෙනවා. එළියට තල්ලු වෙලා ලොකු වෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ vascular cambium එකේ ආ radius එක වැඩි කරගන්නවා. The vascular cambium must be pushed out of the stem. Then the vascular cambium increases in size, right? A secondary vascular cylinder is formed in the center of the stem. So the secondary vascular cambium එක හැදෙනවා center of the stem. There is more secondary xylem and less secondary phloem. Therefore, the primary xylem is pushed toward the pith and block the pith, not the pitch. ඒක pith. pith එක press වෙනවා නැද. හරිද? ඒකින්ද අර accumulative pressure එකක් එනවා මොකටද? center එකට. stem එකේ center එකට primary xylems ටික හිර වෙලා accumulative pressure එකක් එනවා. The primary phloem is pushed out. Formation of the cork cambium. එහෙම තමයි එතකොට secondary growth එක පටන් ගන්න. එතකොට පළවෙනි part එක තමයි vascular cambium එකේ action එක. ඊට පස්සේ cork cambium එක එනවා. ඒක cork cambium එකේ action එක කරන තාපෝ cells divide කරලා plant එකේ girth එක වැඩි කරනවා. ඔය දෙකේම එකතුව තමයි අපි secondary growth කියලා කියන්නේ. right? ඒ කියන්නේ vascular cambium එකේ action එකයි cork cambium එකේ action එකයි තමයි secondary growth එක කියලා කියන්නේ. Parenchymal cell layer, secondary medullary rays in the cortex gains the meristematic action and forms the cork cambium. එතකොට cortex එකේ තියෙන මෙන්න මේ secondary medullary rays එයා division action එක meristematic action එක අරගෙන cork cambium එක හදනවා. right? Produces the cork cambium. The cells in the cork cambium divide inward to form secondary cortex. ඇතුළට divide වෙන cell වලින් secondary cortex එක හැදෙනවා. cortex cork cambium එකකින්. Then the cells that divide outward from the forms the non-living cortex, right? Sorry, non-living cork. right? So ඇතුළට divide වෙන cell වලින් cortex එක හදනවා. එළියට divide වෙන cell වලින් non-living cork එක හදනවා. ඒක තමයි අපි අර bark එක කියන්නේ. තමයි bark එක වෙන්නේ කියන්නේ ටිකක් grow වෙච්ච ගහක bark එක කියන්නේ ඒක. The stem grows by the action of both cambiums, right? Stem එක grow වෙන්නේ තර cork cambium එකයි මේ cambium එකේ දෙකේම action එක නිසා. හරි. Right. Function of the cork, providing protection to internal tissues, right? Then preventing the entry of pathogenic organisms. Then reducing the water loss from the trunk, acting as a thermal insulator, right? ඒවා තමයි functions thing. The bark of the plant stem is visible only after secondary growth. The cork and the epidermis provide mechanical protection to the internal parts of the stem and protects it from the pathogens. The pores in the stem are important for the diffusion of the gases. The primary and the secondary phloem are important for the transport of food, and the primary and secondary cortex are important for the storage of the food, right? And the next thing is the growth rings. The growth ring of the plants are visible from the secondary growth stage. Growth rings in the secondary growth hinda. During secondary growth, when the secondary cell division occurs in cambium, there are differences between the growth rates formed under the favorable and unfavorable conditions. Or secondary growth කියන්නේ මොකක්ද කියලා වුවම පස්සේ මෙන්න මේක ලිව්වමත් ඇති. right? Secondary cell division, secondary cell division, the secondary cell division occurs in the cambium. There are difference between the growth rates formed under favorable and unfavorable environmental conditions. Those are the annual that happens annually are the annual rings. So that is the secondary growth stage formed during the favorable environmental conditions can be seen in large vessels. Favorable conditions වල තින්නේ large vessels compared to the secondary growth vessels formed during the unfavorable environmental conditions. When there are large vessels, there is a light in color because their walls are thin, and when the vessel's cavity is small, the area is dark in color because its walls are thick. It is unfavorable again. This dark and light color area are called the growth rings, right? When considering the main climatic zones of Sri Lanka, the lowland wet zone often has a uniform climate. Therefore, all seasons of the year are favorable for plant growth. Therefore, the growth rings of those plants are not clear. But in the dry zone, there are rainy seasons and dry seasons. During rainy season, the vascular cambium is activated and the growth rings are formed by the accumulation of large hollow vessels. Therefore, a large and light layer of growth ring can be seen. The secondary vessels formed during the dry season have narrow cavities and the number of cells is also low. Therefore, a dark layer of growth ring can be clearly seen. මේ තියෙන ඒ වගේ හැදිච්ච rings. එතකොට මේ ඒ rings ගාන ගණන් කරලා අපිට එයාගේ වයස කියන්න පුළුවන්. සමහරවිට අවුරුද්දක rings දෙක නම් rings දෙක ගාන ගණන් කරොත් අවුරුදු ගාන ගණන් කරගන්න පුළුවන්. Right. Formation of the annual ring. The temperate countries, there are 4 distinct seasons in spring. The secondary vascular cells form more large vessels in autumn, right? More large vessels, like in the spring they form more large vessels, but in autumn the secondary vascular cells form smaller and the number of cells is also less. Therefore, that area is dark in color. In this way, the growth rings formed in one year can be added together and it can be called an annual ring, right? So, sap and the heartwood. In the mid of the tree trunk, various organic substances such as tannin and suberin, right? මේවා මොනවාද? tannin and suberin. Tannin and suberin මොනවාද? Those are secondary metabolites. Tannin and suberin are secondary metabolites. Are deposited in vascular cavities. Because of those compounds, dead tissue appears dark in color. That area is called the heartwood, right? So, the heartwood is used to make furniture. The sapwood is not used for that purpose because it has more food and moisture reserves. Sap එක කියලා කියන්නේ අර අපි එලය කියලා කියන්නේ ගහේ. ඒකේ තියෙන්නේ වැඩිපුරම ෆ්ලෝයම් එක. ඒකේ තියෙන්නේ එතකොට මොයිස්චර් තියෙනවා, ෆුඩ් තියෙනවා. ඒකෙන්ද ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉක්මනටම දිරනවා. හાર્ට්වුඩ් එක දිරන්නේ නැහැ. Right. Main parts of the stem of monocotyledonous plant and their trunk. හරිද? ස්ට්‍රක්චර්ස් ටික දීලා තියෙනවා. Hey. Give me a second. right. So now the features of the main parts of the stem, monocotyledonous and dicotyledonous plant, and their function, right. So the first part is epidermis, which is the outer layer, the structure made of single cell layer, a silica layer deposited on its surface. So එකේ extra silica layer එකක් තියෙනවා surface එකේ deposit වෙලා, right. Made of a single cell layer, a silica layer has deposited on its surface, right. And the task is it provides the mechanical protection to the internal parts of the stem, prevents the entry of pathogens, right. There's very less chance. Simple. නිකන් හැබැයි බලාගෙන තියාගන්න නිකන් හරි MCQ එකකට આવුත් answer කරන්න. And the epidermis, that is epidermis we discussed, and the ground tissue, which is the filling part. The cortex and the medulla cannot be separated. They can cortex medulla කියලා separately identify කරන්න බෑ. It's more like one unit. So importance is to serve function and strength. Ground tissue එකෙන් තමයි strength එක දෙන්නේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට. Vascular region. The vascular parts are scattered, uneven in size. So they are not even in size and they are scattered, like distributed everywhere on the stem. The xylem transport water and minerals, while the phloem transport the food, right? Right. Yeah. So the final few are there. Right. So the importance of the stem. The stem of plant acts as a supporting structure for the roots, flowers, and the fruits. And efflorescence කියන එක මෙන්න මේකට තමයි add වෙන්න ඕන. මේ හරියට add වෙන්න ඕන. අපි ඒකේ efflorescence කියන එකක් දාමු. මෙතනින් දාන්නම් මම හොඳයි. efflorescence කියලා කියන්නේ flowers, yeah, emerge from the stem. Right. Flowers emerge from the stem is called the efflorescence, right. And the stem acts as a supporting structure for the roots, flowers, and fruits. The location of the leaves on the stem determines the amount of light the stem is exposed to. The stem also helps transport water and minerals from the root system to the top of the stem and transport food produced in the leaves to the root system. This happens through the vascular system that runs through the stem, right? And the economic importance of the stem. A source of timber as a source of industrial related natural products for the rubber, gum, and resins. As a source of medicine, as a human food resource. Make up the money structure daily. Right. And the getting fiber. Yeah. Extraction of latex to obtain the biofuel. For the production of electricity, like the Gracidia wood. Right. Then the plant root. Except for the vascular bundles, the other tissue in the roots of monocotyledonous and the dicotyledonous are similar, right? Vascular bundles venas වුණාම පස්සේ, apart from the vascular bundles, rest of the features are same, right? In the lacy. The outer layer of the root is the epidermis. Growing out of the epidermis are root hairs. Epidermis එක තියෙනවා අර අපි අරගෙත් යන්නේ. ඒ වගේ මේකෙත් root hairs තියෙනවා. Right, which are single cell growth structures, and they are single cell layers, the root hairs. This absorb water and minerals, and the structure of the root hairs increases the surface area of the absorptive surface. The epidermis protects the inner tissue of the root, right. The ground tissue between the epidermis and the vascular cylinder is called the cortex. That is also important. The ground tissue between the epidermis and the vascular cylinder. මෙතන vascular cylinder එක තියෙනවා, epidermis එක තියෙනවා, single cell එකක්. මේ දෙන්න අතර තියෙන කොටසට අපි කියන මොකක් කියලාද? මෙන්න මේ part එක cortex එක. epidermis එකයි vascular bundle එකයි අතර. නැද්ද? මේ තියෙන vascular bundle එක කියලා ගන්නකො. ඒක vascular cylinder එක කියන්නේ vascular bundle එකේ තියෙන cylinder එක. ඒකයි epidermis එකයි අතර තියෙන එකට අපි කියනවා cortex, right? That is called the cortex. It consists of parenchyma cells and the intercellular spaces. The carbohydrates are stored in the cortex and transports water and minerals to the dermis, right? The specialized cell layer inside the cortex in the endodermis. Now, cortex එකේ තියෙනවා endodermis එකක්, right? Endodermis. cortex එකේ තියෙන specialized cell layer එකක් තමයි endodermis එක. මේ තියෙන. එතකොට මේ තියෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? මේ තියෙන්නේ අර single cell layer එක මොකද්ද? epidermis එක. ඊට පස්සේ මේ තියෙන්නේ vascular bundle එක. ඒ කියන්නේ vascular cylinder එක. හරි vascular cylinder එක තමයි මේ තියෙන්නේ. vascular cylinder එකේ මැද තියෙන්නේ නෑ අතර මේ vascular cylinder එක කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ මැද තියෙන එක. හරි. මෙන්න මේ ටික තමයි vascular cylinder එක. මෙන්න මේ ටික. එතකොට vascular cylinder එකයි ඒ අතර ටිකට අපි කියන මොකක් කියලාද? cortex එක. ඒතර cortex එකේ derive වෙච්ච එකක් තමයි cortex එකෙන් හැදිච්ච එකක් තමයි මොකද්ද? endodermis එක කියලා කියන්නේ. හරි. Right. Specialized cell layer inside the cortex is the endodermis. The cells of the endodermis are elongated. In young roots, their longitudinal and transverse walls are covered with bands of suberin or lignin. හරි. ඒ කියන්නේ මෙන්න මේ endodermis එකේ longitudinal and transverse. හරිද? ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් මම මේක ඇන්දොතින් මේක හිතන්න cubical shape කියලා cell එක. මෙන්න මෙහෙම cubical shape එකක් කියලා හිතන්නකෝ. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ තියෙන ටික. හරි. මේ layer එක කියන්නේ මැද ටික නෑ හොඳේ. මෙන්න මේ ටික මේ වෙලා මේක දිගටම යනවා. මේ endodermis එකේ මෙන්න මේ cell layer එක. එතකොට මෙන්න මේවා කව වෙලා තින්නේ අර tannin වලින්. ඒතර මැද තින්නේ hole එකක්. ඔන්න ඒ hole එකෙන් තමයි අර water යන්නේ. හරි. ඔව් hollow cube එකක් වගේ යන්නේ. මේකට අපි කියන Caspar region එක කියලා අර ඒ විදිහට suberin වලින් tannin වලින් කව වෙලා තියෙන ටික ටික අපේ Caspar region එක. Caspar region එක තහලා නැහැ. අහන chance එකක් තියෙනවා. Right. The cells of the endodermis are elongated in young roots. The longitudinal and transverse walls are covered with bands of suberin and lignin. ඒක තමයි radial විදියට කියන්නේ මේ root එකේ radial water transferring කරන්නේ ඒකෙන්. මෙහිම නියන් radial නියන්නේ. radially ගානට මැදට අරන් යන්නේ යා. වෙන තැන් වලට යන්න දෙන්නේ නැති වෙන්නේ. accumulate වෙන්න දෙන්නේ නැති වෙන්නේ. In young roots, their longitudinal and transverse walls are covered with the bands of suberin or lignin or both. These are called the Caspar bands. එතකොට මෙන්න මේ longitudinally and transversely covered with walls වලට අපි කියනවා Caspar band කියලා කියන්නේ. endodermis එකේ longitudinally and transverse walls covered with suberin and lignin are called the Caspar band. හරි. Caspar band එක අහලා නැහැ. අහන්න පුළුවන් අහුවොත් අමාරු එකක් වනේ.
Caspar band කියන්නේ
endodermis එකේ අර suberin වලින් lignin වලින් cover වෙච්ච layer එක. That is called the Caspar.
cortex එකයි මේකේ මැද.
ඔව්. ඔව්. දැන් මේ තියෙන endodermis එකේ cell layer එක. මේක මෙන්න මේ අර මේවා ඔව් වටේ ඒක තමයි band එක. හරියට නිකන් මේ වගේ. ඒතර මේක නම් endodermis එක. ඔව්. මෙහෙම කව වෙලා තියෙන Caspar එකකින්. ඒතර මැද්දෙන් තමයි යන්නේ මත. Right. Right. Inside the endodermis is the pericycle, which is a layer of unspecialized cells and has 2 to 35 layers of parenchyma cells. හරි. ඒතර Caspar band එකට ඇතුලෙන් තියෙන pericycle එක. pericycle එකේ 2 to 35 layers of parenchyma cells තියෙනවා. Vascular tissue is located in the central cylinder inside the root, right? Vascular tissue එකේ තියෙන්නේ මැද්දේ central එකේ. In cross section of a dioecious plant or the dicotyledonous plant, the vascular zone is located in the shape of a star. මේකෙන් තමයි අපිට මේ root එකේ root එක dicotyledonous ද monocotyledonous කියලා identify කරන්න පුළුවන්. මෙන්න මේ star shape එකකින් තියෙනවා නම් vascular bundle එක. එහෙනම් dicot එක. මේ විදිහට නිකන් මෙහෙම තියෙනවා නම් ඒක මොනොකොට් එක. හරි. ඊටු ටික ඔක්කොම ටික එකයි හොඳේ. මේ දෙන්නගේ ඊටු ටික ඔක්කොම එකයි. මෙයාගේ මේ ස්ටාර් එක තියෙනවා. ස්ටාර් එකේ මැද තියෙනව මොනවාද? මේ සයිලම් ෆ්ලෝයම්ස් තියෙන්නේ. මේ ස්ටාර් එක විදියට තියෙන්නේ සයිලම්ස්. මේ රවුම් විදියට තියෙන්නේ මොනවාද? ෆ්ලෝයම්ස්. හරි. ඒ ස්ටාර් එකයි ওই ඩොට් එකකින් තමයි අපි සෙකන්ඩරි එක අඳුරගන්නේ. Right, phloem are settled between the branches of the xylem. Phloems are settled between the branches of the xylem. මේ star එක හැටියට තියෙන්නේ xylem එක branches වල තියෙනවා phloems. මේකෙන් තමයි identify කරන්නේ. හරිද? right. එතන මේ තියෙන Caspar region එක. කළු පාටට තියෙන Caspar region එක. මේ තියෙන්නේ ඒතර මේ full cell layer එක මොකද්ද? එයා endodermis එක. හරිද? එතන මෙන්න මේවා ලේබල් කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා නේද? root hairs තියෙනවා ඊට පස්සේ epidermis එක ඊට පස්සේ මේ තියෙන cortex එක එකේ තියෙනවා endodermis endodermis එකට වෙනකම්ම තියෙන්නේ මේ ටික cortex එක ඊට පස්සේ ඇතුළේ තියෙනවා primary phloem primary xylem ඊටත් ඇතුළෙන් තියෙනවා ඒ කියන්නේ endodermis එකට ඇතුළෙන් තියෙනවා දැන් මේකනේ endodermis එක ඊට ඇතුළෙන් තියෙනවා pericycle එක ඊට පස්සේ lateral roots තියෙනවා lateral roots එක ඊට පස්සේ මේ මැද තියෙන කැල්ල cortex එක කියලා කියනවා. හරි. මේ තියෙන්නේ vascular bundle එකක් කියන්න බෑ. මොකද vascular bundle එකේ තියෙන මැද දිලා තියෙන tele කියලානේ. tele කියලා දිලා තියෙන ඒක එන එකක් නෑ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට. හරි. vascular bundle එක කියන්නේ මැද part එක. මේ star එක තමයි star එකයි ඒ ටික. Right. In the monocot roots, the ground tissue is surrounded by parenchyma cells and a ring of xylem and phloem cells. The root cap of the root protects the young root from soil particles. The mature root lacks root hair and has lenticels, right? මෙන්න මේ root cell එකේ තියෙන root cap එකක්. ඒ root cap එකෙන් දෙපැත්තට තමයි cells divide වෙන්නේ. කියන්නේ එළියටත් cells divide වෙනවා. ඇතුළටත් cells divide වෙනවා. එළියට divide වෙන cell එක තමයි soil එකට resist වෙන්නේ. ඒ දැන් මෙයා grow වෙලා පල්ලෙහාට යනවනේ. එතකොට cells damage වෙනවනේ. ඒ damage වෙන එකට තමයි outer cell division එක තියෙන්නේ. inner cell division එකකින් වෙන්නේ root එක elongate වෙන එක. එහෙමයක් වෙන්නේ. මේ inner cells වලින් root එක grow වෙනවා. outer cells වලින් soil එකේ අර දින resistance එක කඩාගෙන යන එක කියන්නේ soil එකට damage වෙන්න තමයි ඒක තියෙන්නේ. damage වෙවි පල්ලෙහාට යනවා ඒක. The root system anchors the plant to the substrate and supports the stem. Absorption of water and minerals and the food storage are the importance, right? ඒවත් මතක තියාගන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ plant එක anchor කරනවා ground එකට ඊට පස්සේ absorption of water and minerals and the food storage, right? Water absorption through the root cap or epidermis cells of the root and the food and nutrient storage and for medicines and also nitrogen screening කරනවා මොනවාද legume plants වලනේ. That's it. Yeah, we're recording for the plant now, right? Okay, good thing. Happy now, huh? Okay. Right. Can the broadcast.